Inside of the Sanctum Sanctorum, we open Doctor Strange issue 16 with a flashback. We are inside of the Crypt of Shadows, a dimension behind the mirrors of this house. Trapped inside of it is the ghost of Victor Strange, Stephen Strange's brother. Someone starts to talk to him. For a moment, Victor thinks that he's gone mad. The voice agrees that he has, but that doesn't mean that his new friend isn't also there. "I have no friends!" Victor cries in dismay. All he has left are the stories. The new friend agrees. "You are a story, Victor Strange, and you do have one friend." From there, the story for this issue has two main narrative threads. One explains how Victor Strange went from a passive, forgotten ghost to a deadly, menacing threat. The second narrative is Wong's story battling that threat. You see, during his time on the Strange books, author Jed MacKay has dusted the character off a little bit and given him a conceptual facelift. Wong is no longer just Strange's butler or sidekick or aide. He is a true ally, working as a skilled agent of Wand. Think of Wand as like S.H.I.E.L.D., but for magical threats instead of Hydra-based terrorism. This allows Wong to go do good work in the world, sure, with his own sense of agency, his own sense of purpose. He's no longer just tied to Stephen Strange. But this also means that Wong harbors a little bit of guilt for not being there. He took an oath to protect the Sorcerer Supreme, to guard him. As far as Wong is concerned, that is his job, that is his purpose for being, and he has failed in it. I mean, just look at Doctor Strange. Dude's a flippin' vampire. In the Red Bad comics, he's been dissected. The dude is going through some really tough stuff right now, and Wong wasn't there for him. However, Wong is sure that they can fix this. They've been through tough times before. There will be a solution. There will be a way. Back in Victor's story, we see his friend acknowledge that he isn't actually a true vampire. Victor was made into a vampire by Stephen's guilt. He was a ghost first, and then he became a ghost vampire second. But he doesn't care about that. His new friend says that if you're a vampire, then you're my child. And as a loving father, it offers advice and a promise. Soon, it will clear the way for Victor to strike at his brother and get revenge. All Victor has to do is do it. In reality, Wong is horrified when the vampire body of Stephen Strange starts talking to him, taunting him. He quickly realizes that this isn't Stephen, although Victor does like the idea of pretending to be Stephen. He likes that story of him pretending to be his brother as a trick. But this isn't that kind of story, he says. No, this is a horror story. Short and brutal. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown's continued coverage of Blood Hunt, Episode 11, Wong, Vampire Slayer. We get one more scene of Victor and his friend, who is revealed to be Blade, of course. This moment reinforces the idea that Victor is a story, and now his story has become that of the vampire. They were born in words of blood in Atlantis when the Darkhold was originally written, and a story wants nothing more than to be told, Blade says. Then the fight scene happens. Victor drops some clues as to his identity, which Wong picks up upon, but he's also still confused. Victor doesn't talk the way that he used to. He doesn't behave the way Victor Strange behaved. And Victor actually agrees. His role in the story has been changed. He is no longer the hero's sad little brother in a minor role. Now he is the villain, quote, the swaggering urbane vampire, well-spoken, clad in a billowing shirt, clutching a goblet filled with an indeterminate red, end quote. And he grabs Wong by the throat. Still, Wong resists. He reminds Victor that he wasn't a villain, not in reality. He killed himself so that he wouldn't take any more lives. Even when possessed by the bloodlust of a vampire when he was alive, there was still goodness in Victor Strange. Victor replies that death couldn't take him. He was left as a ghost, trapped in the Crypt of Shadows, alone. Alone, save for the stories. Wong continues to fight back, freeing himself from Victor's grasp, and pulls a pair of silver knuckles and a stake from his belt. You need to get your story straight, Victor. You were mourned. We all mourned your loss, he says, but it wasn't enough for Victor. He is a vampire. All he does is thirst, is want. Nothing in this world will ever be enough for him. It's part of his nature now. A punch from the silver knuckles stuns Victor. Wong acknowledges that sure, he is a vampire, but he doesn't have Steven's magical training, he doesn't have Wong's martial skills, doesn't have either of their experience. Wong is his better in this fight. You can't win, Victor. When Steven returns, we can help you, Wong offers. But now Victor flies into a rage. He doesn't want Steven's help. It was Steven who made him into this. All the help that he needed, he has been given. Wong guesses that this means Blade, and he's right, obviously. But the kick that came with that realization helped Victor learn something as well. That Wong is holding back in this fight. Wong is better in a straight fight, Victor exists. But Victor's nerve, his will, is far stronger. He won't be stopped. But as the villain of this story, he does have a role to play. All the best villains possess a sense of fair play, after all. So he pulls down Steven's shirt, exposing his chest, and he tells Wong to strike. Wong has everything he needs to kill Victor and end this threat. But he can't. Victor throws him to the floor. Of course you can't. You love my brother too much to kill me, because killing me means killing him. Quote, your fangs have been pulled, Wong, while mine remain oh so sharp. End quote. Victor then gives Wong a chance to run so that he can hunt him. After all, what vampire story doesn't have a hunt through a darkened house? Wong runs by a mirror, letting us slip inside of it. Baron Mordo, the ghost dog Bats, and the two snakes, Alistair and Anton, are gathered on a circle of power inside of the Crypt of Shadows. They were all trapped here by Victor over the course of this volume of Doctor Strange, except for Mordo, who Strange put here intentionally. In any case, with some air of gravity, Bats declares that it's all up to them. They're gonna have to save the day. So I absolutely love the theatricality of Victor Strange here. He is so over the top in this story. He's kind of Shakespearean in his dialogue and actions. He is looking at himself as a role in a play. He knows that he's in a story that is larger than his own story, and so he has been shaped to fit that story. And there's definitely a part of me that loves that idea. Stories change based upon the telling of the story, and so now Victor has changed over the years. Him dying in order to save lives has pretty much been forgotten. All that is remembered is his greatest hits. He's Doctor Strange's brother, he turned into a vampire, and he was a bad guy. So Victor is all of those things, and he is only those things. Anything that was Victor Strange is gone. He isn't a person anymore. He is a one-note bad guy in a story. And that's a pretty cool meta-narrative, especially since we live in an age where the stories that we read on the internet are just accepted as fact, as truth about people in our lives. To the point that, as a society, we then change to fit those stories, as opposed to objective, real reality. This aspect of this issue of Doctor Strange, and I think the presentation of it, is great. I also really like just the story duality of Wong and Victor fighting, because both of them ultimately are brothers to Stephen Strange, one of them by blood and one of them by spirit. And I love that Wong doesn't even want to believe that Victor is bad. He spends pretty much this whole fight holding back because he doesn't want to hurt him. He ultimately sacrificed his life to save people, to do good. He shouldn't be punished for that. He should be saved. And it's just at this point, Victor doesn't see how he could be saved. He can't be. Villains don't get saved, villains get stopped. There is also a little bit of Wong not wanting to destroy Victor because of the impact that would have on Steven. And obviously we've got the main impact of that's Steven's body he's in. If Wong stakes it, Steven's astral form, ghost, spirit, soul has no body to return to. And I don't know how big a problem that really is for the Sorcerer Supreme, but it would still be a problem, right? But also think about the emotional damage that that would do to Doctor Strange. Like, imagine, you're Doctor Strange, your body has been quote-unquote killed and turned into a vampire, you have just visited one of your greatest enemies, Doctor Doom, with your wife in order to save the world. You get home from doing all of that crap. You just want to slip back into your comfortable body and maybe kiss your wife and pet your ghost dog. And then your best friend tells you that your thought-dead ghost's brother has actually been living beside your mirrors for potentially years. He went insane. He became a vampire. He tried to kill you, and then you were forced to destroy him and as such destroyed Steven's body. I'm Sorry just doesn't seem to cover that level of crap, right? Wong's motivations and perspective in this issue, in my opinion, are well handled. I love him trying to take it easy on Victor as the fight starts. You can see him reasoning, and he's engaged in hand-to-hand martial arts, but it isn't until Victor proves himself like a physical threat that Wong pulls out the anti-vampire weaponry. That's a really cool way to ramp up the tension of the story as we move along in it. And I love the super weird assemblage of background characters that it looks like are going to save the day here. Doctor Strange's ghost dog, Bats, has been a kind of long-running character at this point for a Doctor Strange secondary character. Alistair and Anton, the magical snakes, have been just a bunch of fun ever since Jed MacKay... Did he first introduce them during his run on Black Cat? Or did they show up? I think they may have shown up during Jason Aaron's run as background characters. It might have been Jed MacKay's run on Black Cat, actually. But they're super fun, and they're really weird, and they're just a pleasure to read. And having one of Strange's oldest frenemies, Baron Mordo, be potentially the source of his salvation, that's a cool underdog twist that I super appreciate. The second that Baron Mordo got shoved into the Crypt of Shadows, I was like, ooh, that's a cool way to... It's a cool way to end the immediate threat that he posed, but also set him up for a future return. As a tie-in to the Blood Hunt event, I do think that this story is particularly weak. I do appreciate that Blade has two plans for handling Doctor Strange. You know, he had his main attack, which was stab him through the heart and then turn him into a vampire. And then you've got Victor acting as kind of this backup knife waiting behind the dock. Strange is a powerful magician, and if he had been free to act during Blood Hunt without any of this "I've been turned into a vampire" stuff, he probably could have solved this story by now. But wrapping Strange up in so many problems has slowed any focus that he has, and it shifted his attention away from "let me deal with vampires" to "I've got to handle all of these problems." It goes to show you how much planning went into this on the part of Blade, and how well he knows his enemies. And again, I think that's really clever and really smart. I don't think, though, that the story does a good job of explaining Victor's backstory in a way that makes sense. Much like Victor says in this issue, the only things that we are told as an audience are his greatest hits, but we have no real context for them. At one point, when Wong realizes who Victor actually is, we see a shot of him dressed in the Baron Blood costume. And because he was Baron Blood for like 15 minutes, but we have no context for it. When Victor became a vampire, why did he become a vampire? Why was he an evil vampire, by the way? Could he not fight the infection? Did Steven not help him? And when he did die, how did he become a ghost? How did that ghost become a vampire? If I'm to believe that stories can change who they are told about, and that is something I'm willing to believe in a meta comic book perspective, then that means someone has to be telling the story of that person, right? If the idea is Victor Strange died, and due to unfinished business or the guilt of Doctor Strange, his ghost stayed around, okay, cool. That kind of jives with what our general society has accepted about ghosts. But to then go, his ghost is a vampire, despite the fact that he doesn't drink anything, he does not consume food, he is a ghost. What are you talking about? He's a ghost vampire. That doesn't make sense. And I'm willing to let it make sense. But tell me what it means, right? How did that happen? The idea would seem to be that Doctor Strange was so affected by Victor as a vampire that his guilt turned Victor into a vampire ghost. But what? Again, it's really weird, and we don't have a lot of groundwork for anything like this, so I just don't know. Short of 2 Crypt of Shadows one-shots, no one in the world of Doctor Strange cares about, talks about, or tells stories about Victor Strange. You never see Steven sitting around on like a rainy day and Clea being like, "My dear, what's wrong? You seem to be in a funk." And then he's like, "I was just thinking about my poor, lost, misguided brother. I feel so bad that he became a vampire, and I'll only ever always think of him as a vampire. Ah, poor Victor." You never see anything like that. This guy's a footnote in comic book history. He's a cute piece of Doctor Strange comics trivia. There's just not a lot of information about him out there. So as someone, like, in the history of Doctor Strange, I'm relatively new to the character. I started buying Doctor Strange books really in the early 2000s. I think Jason Aaron's run was the first run that I really collected. I do have the 1980s volume of Strange Tales, where it was him and Cloak and Dagger were co-starring in the book. So I do have some Doctor Strange stuff, but since the character appeared in the 1960s, there's almost 40 years of comic history that I have almost no knowledge of. So for me, as someone who likes to dig into the background of characters and I'll read the Wikipedia page, I'll read the Marvel fandom wiki, but that's not as fun as being told the story and knowing the story. And this bit of story work for me is a little frustrating in that it doesn't really give me a good idea of how Victor became what Victor is in this story. I just would have really appreciated a more thorough examination of his backstory within the framework of Doctor Strange's ongoing series. Maybe something along those lines of Stephen having a morose afternoon and he re-goes through all of the Victor stuff in his head. That could have been interesting. Maybe Blade or Bloodline could have stopped by, his daughter Brielle Brooks, Heiko. Maybe they could have stopped by at some point, and then that got him thinking about vampires. You could have had it be something with one of the students at the school, something along those lines. I just would have liked more. The interaction between story and reality has become a bit more of a common theme in the world of comics, specifically Marvel Comics recently, and in general, I do really like it. Al Ewing has been playing with that idea over in Immortal Thor at the moment. Kieran Gillen has been playing with it as just like a theme for a couple years in various works. Once and Future King had a lot of the idea of stories are real and stories affect reality in it, and I really like it. But I do feel like Jed MacKay is just fumbling the ball a little bit without establishing a lot of that background here in Doctor Strange. All of those complaints aside, this is definitely more of an issue of Doctor Strange than it is a Blood Hunt tie-in, but I'm also okay with that, because it is Doctor Strange's comic, and I did still enjoy it. It does all work. It does mostly make sense, other than, like I said, I think we're missing some foundational things where when I read the comic, I'm like, yeah, this was good. And then I stop and I think about the comic, and I'm like, well, I don't know, how about... if Victor is so intent on being the vampire villain of this story, I want to understand why he is a ghost vampire. I want to know that motivation, because otherwise we have, and not we have, because I didn't do it, but otherwise Jed MacKay has stripped any character and personality away from Victor Strange just to make him a one-note villain, and I do think that's kind of frustrating from a reading perspective. Pasqual Ferry's artwork for this issue is great. I do personally think Ferry's work is really hit or miss depending on the book that he has put on, but I think he's been a perfect match for this volume of Doctor Strange. His work is kinetic and ethereal. It's just looseness to imply kind of the loosey-goosey nature of magic, but you can, when he hits Victor, it looks like he hits this blood everywhere. It's great. Next episode, I'm finally doing it. I thought that I had dodged this one. But no, we're going to cover the Black Panther tie-in miniseries. T'Challa is a vampire in Wakanda, resisting the will of Blade. But how long can that last for? And what secrets will he uncover about the history of vampires? If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.